Hello world, and welcome back. I'm Don, and as you may have guessed, today's video is going to be all about doing a start to finish with this aurora scene that I shot just a few days ago. I guess last weekend it was. Just wanted to go through the process that I've taken as I've been playing around with this image. Like many people in the world, I don't tend to do. I have done a few times some aurora photography, but I'm not one of the people that's out there day in, day out, you know, chasing these things all the time. It was just, obviously we're having, you know, biggest storm of our lifetimes, and I got out there and took a shot. I've chosen this one particularly because of the variety of colors that are in it. What we're looking at now is the photo after it's been through Nik. So this is kind of a more or less complete, although there is one little change I'm going to make as I'm going through, something that I thought that I could definitely improve while I was looking at it. If I just jump back here, this is pretty much what the edit looks like after having gone through Photolab, and then this one here is all the way back to the original. And to be fair, so this was shot on, I think, just daylight. I think I just left my camera where it was, and I shot it a bit, I won't say overexposed because nothing is overexposed. You can see from the histogram there. I shot it brighter than looks nice, if that makes sense. And I did that because I thought there's going to be so much dark stuff, and if I can get another stop worth of details in those shadowy areas, that might turn out to be helpful to me. So I recognize I took earlier in the shoot, I took some that were more at, you know, here, I'll just scroll back a little bit. Yeah, those are probably a little bit more at an exposure that starts to make the sky look nicer. Certainly that one is. That was certainly bright, wasn't it? But, you know, I just, again, I'm a novice to this. I was just trying to think what's going to work best for me in the edit. So that's where I went with it anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and dive in and start to work towards this in Photolab. And then once I've done that, I'll send it across to Nik and add a few more bits and pieces. Still really enjoying Nik Collection 7, I have to say. The improvements I've already, just yesterday or the day before, I did some graduation photos at the weekend, and I was piling through those because there were quite a few of them, and I went to edit something, and I wanted to drop an oval control point on something, and then realized that I was in Photolab, and I was like, oh no. And I have every faith that we will see oval control points in Photolab, but of course I also strongly suspect that we're going to need to wait until the release of Photolab 8, which, given history, I would say could be anywhere between late September or October. Never can be sure with these things. I'm just going by when it's dropped in the past. So anyway, let's jump in and start to edit this photo and see where we go with it. So this is a virtual copy of it right here. So I'll just jump over to that, and I'm going to get rid of this panel, make things a bit bigger, put my histogram up here, maybe where it's a little easier to see. And I'll start off this show by going to apply presets and going to natural. And that's just doing a lot of my lens correction stuff, getting things started out. Now I also will just pop over here and going to come down here to, rather than natural, I'm going to go vibrant, just to pull a little bit more of the colors out of there. And while I'm in the color space, I'm also going, obviously the white balance of this is not correct, and I reckon about 4,000 is a pretty nice place to be. So I've impacted those two things, and just while I'm here, for good measure, I'll just point out the fact that because I used that preset, there's also just a little tad, if I come down to my HSL space, there's a little tad of saturation and vibrancy that's added as a part of that preset, and I'm fine with that. I'll leave that on. So I'll come over here to the light tab, and I guess pretty much I'm happy. There are things that are part of that preset, and they're all pretty minor little things. A little bit of contrast, a little bit of clear view, little tweak on the selective tone, little touch of smart lighting. I'm happy enough with all of those things, but I think the base exposure wants to be a little bit different. So I'm just going to come up here and I'm actually going to bring this down to, just use my right click trick, minus 1.5. And yes, I recognize that is a little probably too dark at this time. Bear with me. What I'm going to do sort of on balance with that is I'm going to come down here to the tone curve and I'm going to drag my white point in maybe to about 220-ish. So go about there. That'll be close enough. And now you might be thinking to yourself, why did I not just, rather than doing that, coming down here to brighten it up, why did I just not go quite as low? And that's a fair point. I asked myself the same question. You know, it's a really cool thing about doing these videos is that it kind of makes you question your techniques a little bit. So let me show you. This is what I thought would be the case, and it does hold true. So I'm just going to Command J to make a duplicate of this one at this point. So you can see here, this is number 2. This is the one I was working on, and it's just created number 3. So on number 3, I will go a different route, and I will put that down to about 1, and I will reset this. So now if I look at the way that I'm kind of getting the idea that I'm in a similar spot is I'm looking at where the peak of the histogram goes. So if I switch, so this is the one where it's exposure only and it's not gone down as far. And this is the one where I've done the exposure further and then pulled it back. How's that? How did I go with that histogram? Yeah, I mean, that peak is at a pretty similar place. So you can see basically it's just doing slightly different things with the way that it pulls out the data, so to speak. And I just happen to prefer leaving some of the bits a bit darker and then pulling the highlightier or the slightly brighter bits up, creating a little bit more contrast between the two. So that was my hope, and that is more or less what has happened. So just so I don't get confused, I'm going to get rid of this one again now. Remove. Yes. Back on to number 2. Great. So as I mentioned, the preset put all of my lens corrections on, so vignetting is on. If I come over here to detail, you can see lens softness and chromatic aberration are on. I will switch this. It's not it's only, I shot this on, let's see, 8 seconds, ISO 1600, f4. It was my 14 to 30 lens at 14 millimeters. Anyway, long and the short is, at 1600 on a Nikon Z6, it's not terribly noisy. That sensor is incredible. But just for good measure, and because I might try to pull things out of the shadows a little bit, I'm going to put on Deep Prime, because Deep Prime XD, pardon me, because I just reckon that will just make sure that things are as clean as they can be. So that's my logic. Just popping over here, crop and distortion are already on, and just want to do a little something like that with my horizon, and I'm happy with that. And nothing from the effects space, so I'll just come over here to the local adjustments tab. And the first thing I want to do in here is to add a luminosity mask. Again, keep in mind, I have got Film Pack installed, so if you do not have Film Pack, you might not have luminosity masking as a part of your functions. So I'll just click the wee icon. I'll come down in here to a dark space, click that, and you can see there that it's done a really nice job of masking that out. I'm going to just smooth out some of these bits by bringing this out a little bit more. That looks like a perfectly good place to be. And with that, I am just going to go ahead and raise the exposure. Oh, that's not, I totally grabbed the wrong slider there. Raise the exposure a little bit, not much. See how we go with that. And I'll just pop down here and also grab those shadows just a little bit, just bring those up. Again, not a huge amount. And the other thing that I want to do with this is I want to make sure that there's still a sense of dimension in these front rocks. So I don't want them all to brighten up at an equal sort of pace. So I'm just going to come up here and grab a brush. Oh, you know, and it's interesting because given my workflow, I grabbed the brush and then I was going to hold the Alt key, but you know, I can just also grab the eraser since I'm doing this from scratch. And just have a nice big eraser going on here. Feathering is all the way up, flow is a little bit low. And I'm just going to get down here and do like that maybe. And just bring the dimensionality back into those bits of the rock. So let's see a little before and after. You can see it's just bringing things up a little. Again, it's a nighttime scene. I don't want to bring things up too much. It's a tricky balance, but you know, I'm doing my best. So let's keep going. So the next thing that I want to do is I'll do a plus on here because I want to do a new mask and I want to do another luminosity mask. And I'm just going to pop this one up here. I expect, yep, that's pretty much what I expected for a selection. So that's great. And with this one, I'm trying to impact the look of things here, so I'm going to actually bring my midtones down a bit and my shadows down a bit, and going to increase my contrast. There we go. Just trying to add a little depth and saturation in through that space. I'm going to just up this a little bit of extra warmth just in that central bit. And the other thing that I want to do is just slide down here and going to bump saturation. Go back one on that and bump my vibrancy on that space. Great, so I am happy with that. Oops, I just accidentally right-clicked. Now, one last thing I want to do, and I'm just going to grab my brush. And I'm going to make sure that because brush will work with luminosity mask, I'm going to make sure that I do plus first so that I don't add to that last luminosity mask that I was doing. And I'm going to make this quite a bit smaller. Increase my flow. Be a little smaller still. Basically, I'm doing a little wipe across here. And I'm just going to come down and increase my vibrancy on these a little bit more too. Maybe even just to get that little bit of reflection through there. Maybe I've gone too far. It's always such a balance, isn't it? We'll leave it there. So, all right. I reckon I am ready to take this across to Nik Collection, so I'm just going to come here to my Nik Collection. And I just double check. I think I maybe need to change this. Yes, so I need to change this to export as a TIFF. Click OK, and color effects. Keep in mind that the time here is in that I had Deep Prime XD, so it's not that Nik Color Effects is taking ages to load. It's that it took a while to process that noise reduction. All right, looking good. So let's start things off in here. I will just say, by the way, because it's one of the ones that I sometimes forget about, so I think it's worth mentioning. The other day, I had a little bit of help from this last edits spot. So basically, recent edits you've done, you can kind of go through and choose them and reapply them. I got into a situation where I'd done an edit I really liked on an image, and then I think I just lost the file. I actually don't even know how. But anyway, I didn't have it so that I could go back into it and see what I had done. So, but I was saved. I could see what I had done because I came in and I chose my last edit and applied it, and it put all of the bits and pieces back on. So that's a really handy feature. I've never ever needed it before, but let's say if you need it, it's really super helpful. All right, so the first thing I want to do here is, interestingly enough, I want to add a soft focus filter. There we go, classical soft focus. I'll just add that in there. And I'm more or less going to leave this how it is, with the exception that I'm going to change this from soft focus space down to diffusion space. And one of the things I know is that although I love this, you know, if I off and on this and you watch those colors, I love how it kind of just, I don't know, it smears them into one another a little bit in a way that I find pleasing. So I really love that, but I find it just a touch strong on these rocks down here particularly. So I'm just going to remove from those rocks. So if I grab hold of this, and now while I'm hovered over, you can see it says hold Alt to add a neutral. So I don't need to hold Alt when I'm clicking the button here, but when I come over here and click on, I want to hold Alt. So I'll hold Alt, I'll put it maybe right about there. You might have seen my cursor go to a little negative. Sometimes my recording software doesn't grab that so well, but it did. It went to a negative, and I put that on. Now, one thing about this is that it reduces all of the effect on the rocks. So if I do that, you know, still seeing a little bit of effect on some of these really higher up bits, but all of these rocks, it's not showing at all. But I'd actually like a little bit. So with that in place, what I can do, you know, adding that neutral control line basically sets the opacity of the effect to 0 on that spot. So I can just manually up that a bit, maybe set the opacity to 20. So I've got about 20% of the effect showing on these rocks. And up here, of course, 100% is showing on the rocks. So let me just off and on that again. Nice. Small difference, but I like it. And now the next one that I wanted to add, and this has very much just been a bit of experimentation, a bit of fun for me, is one called Low Key. And I'll add that in. I'm using the plus there so it doesn't overwrite my other adjustments. And with this one, I will make a little bit of a change. Obviously, that's taking it super dark. I'm going to leave the glow where it is. I'm going to take the standard low key off, and I'm going to give it just a smattering of dynamic low key, which kind of gives it a little bit of that nice mood without taking it too dark. Saturation and whites, I will leave where they are. So that's all good. And once again, I'm going to just grab one of these and protect these rocks a little bit. And so I've grabbed that. I'm holding Alt for the minus. I'm dragging up, kind of getting it on an angle like that. And again, I really don't want very much of this on the foreground. I'll just experiment with, I'll just do it like a little bit of it. Maybe about there, maybe just a touch. All right, and on to my next one, which is going to be, and this one might surprise you. It's one that I use a reasonable amount, in fact, and have found over time it doesn't often look very good just full on, but it's, to me, it's kind of one that adds a little something if you just use it really light-handedly. But I often like what it kind of does to the colors. So I've just set the opacity to 15%, and I want to just grab a control point, and I will hold my Alt and add the minus there. So negative control point or neutral control point on there, and I want to just drag this out. So happy. Thank you so much to the viewers that popped in the recommendation that you can control or get rid of those little handles. See these little handles with this little icon? That is absolutely wonderful, life-changing for me. Now, so I've added this is a neutral control point, and that's all good. Now, if I just look at that mask, it's a bit like higgly-piggly because of the different colors that are there. So I just want to have that be more like a radial filter. So I'm just going to drop my luminance, and that'll be more like a radial filter there. And that's absolutely fine for this. So just off and on that. And my favorite thing is what it's doing to these blues. It's a small shift, but it really, really pleases me. And I find that these blues go so nicely with everything else. It also adds a little bit of blueness to these stones down here, which I think are really cool. All right, now I'll just finish this off with my favorite Pro contrast. There it is. Do the plus. And like with so many things, I just kind of I just kind of have a go with this. Usually my tendency is just to add a little bit of each of these, and I tend to enjoy that. And you can see just from that before and after how much that kind of lifts things too, you know. It just kind of pulls everything out, gives it some panache, some pop. Yeah, can't say enough about Pro Contrast. I love it. And in so many different situations. You know, it feels like it's a filter that could go on literally any photo. Anyway, like with the rest, I'm going to pull just a little bit of that off of the rocks. I think the rocks have become a little touch prominent there. And that was one of the changes that I wanted to do. I mentioned up front that I'd be doing, you know, roughly to this as my finished image, but with a small change. And I found that my rocks, especially through here, that's why in Photolab I removed some of the local effect from down here. It was for that reason. So I'm holding Alt, dragging that out. I think maybe a little bit of that could come through. See what I think there. Maybe about, yeah, let me just off and on that. Nice. Then let me do like a more global off and on. Nice, I love it. So I'll go ahead and apply. And I am back in the world of Photolab. Let's see, so that's got 2 on it, so this will be the most recent one I did. Just get that to load. Nice. And you can see, what differences do we have? A few little differences, it's pretty close. I know as I was going along that I set some of the sliders ever so slightly differently. You can see what I mean maybe about these rocks here. How it just lacks a little dimensionality down there, and what I did with it this time just kept a bit more of the darkness there, so you can still kind of get a sense of the lightest little sense for the rocks, but without them being quite as in your face. So I'll go ahead and press Escape to get rid of all those tools. Bring that down so you can maybe see it a bit better. And that is the finished product. So I'd love to know what you think. If there's anything that you think I could do to improve this. Everybody's got different tastes, but you know, I always learn something when people call out and say, hey, have you tried this? Have you thought about that? Yeah, with that, I will leave you for the day. I've got to go get ready and head off to early Saturday morning soccer game. So hopefully it's not too cold out. We've been pretty brisk around this part of the world recently. With that, I will say thanks so much for watching, and I will talk again soon. Bye-bye.